I'm Carol Rutter. I am Professor of Shakespeare and Performance Studies at the University of Warwick, and I have written the study guide for King Lear on Digital Theatre Plus.
Why does Lear ask his daughters who loves me most? Is it purely a dramatic device for a director to interpret, or is Shakespeare trying to say something more?
Part of our problem as human beings that he explores terrifically well is that we are curious animals. And we want to know things. And sometimes what we want to know turns out to destroy us. Case in point, Macbeth. Stay, you imperfect speakers. Tell me more. No, Banquo. Asking if you can look into the seeds of time and see which grades will grow and which will not. Speak to me. We want to know stuff. And yet we also know, I'm thinking now of King Henry IV in one of his nights of sleeplessness, when he's looking back to what he did and trying to imagine what's going to come next, has this astonishing moment when he says, you know, if we could look into the book of the future and see what's coming, which of us would not sit ourselves down, close the book, and die? And there's a kind of a double impulse that we are curious animals, we want to know things, and yet we also know that until we experience an event, we probably will not have the know-how or the strength to deal with the event that's coming. So we mustn't know things in advance because we're not going to be big enough to deal with them until we get there. And short-circuiting that process is always going to be a disaster area. I think there are places where, for example, you know, Leontes there with Hermione and Polixenes. He wants Polixenes to stay and he tries to persuade and he can't do it. And then he says, tongue-tied our queen. You know, speak you. And she does. And then he can't quite process the information that she's succeeded where he's failed. Those are such human emotions, and that we then immediately internalize that and start, again, this is it's a technique that Shakespeare has available to him, to write the soliloquy, you know, to stand back and say, what does it mean? What does it mean that this has happened? What does it mean that he said this? What do I make of that? To be or not to be? Whether it is, would a rogue and peasant slave in mind? That we're turning things over in our minds. Our rational quality, that thing that separates us from the beast, is also the thing that separates us from the angels because we have a need to know. It's built into our DNA, and I guess into that original story that connects us back to the Garden of Eden, and why that tree that we were forbidden to eat was the tree of knowledge, bracket of good and evil. Well, knowledge is always good and evil. Oh God! So that's what we are as human beings. It's who we are, what we are. For Lear, I think that the reason that he asked what he asked at this particular time has to do with the particular situation that he's in, and it has to do with the fact that today is the day that those two men, those two foreigners, those two guys from France are going to come into his presence, and they're going to argue which of them loves Cordelia most. Because the person who loves Cordelia most, bracket, who's going to give her most dowry, who's going to give her most honor, who's going to give her most titles, who's going to give her most land, who's going to promise blah, 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 blah. Love there is bracketed in quantification. So that most is a big deal. If you've got two suitors who are vying, you know, who've been long in our court as amorous sojourners to win this girl's hand, of course you're going to have to sit them down at the boardroom table and say, all right, you, Burgundy, do you love her most? What do you mean by most? 3 castles? Again, you play it out in The Taming of the Shrew with two suitors. That auction or competition for the daughter. France, what are you gonna throw in there? Oh, a kingdom. That's even better than Burgundy, isn't it? So you're going to have this kind of competition that is around love and quantification, and I think there's something just in his brain that goes flip. And it has nothing to do with a repressed history of child abuse. It has nothing to do with anything except we're at this particular moment and I'm just curious. Something just flips in my brain and I ask a question and I kind of expect what the answer is going to be, and then the answer doesn't come back to what I expected. And that's why I think Derek Jacobi's reading of that line was so helpful. So he went through the whole setup and then said, which of you shall we say does love us most? So we've got France, we've got Burgundy, but what about us? Me, the king, daddy. I just, once in my life, liked to know that I was not feared, not respected, not obeyed, but loved. And of course for us, because we don't any longer in England carry on transactions over our daughters in marriage that are like this quantification, we of course immediately think that the idea of trying to quantify love is a perversion. And of course it is, because how can you tell what's on your heart? How can you tell what's in your mind? Well, only, again, to go back the other way, only by telling can I give you even an inkling of what's in my heart. It's only by us talking to each other that we can be human in our relationships. Now, all of that Shakespeare throws into the opening of the scene. So you have, as in my understanding of the scene, a Goneril who responds perfectly, brilliantly to the question. Absolutely, it's brilliant. And I imagine that if she were a man, we'd all stand up and clap and say, oh, well done, good courtier. You were commanded to do something by your king. You did it, brilliant. What a terrific performance, because you were asked to perform. And it's only because it's around the issue of tell love, that we, I think, become a little bit too knowing about the play, and get, and think we would make, we would know what to say. We would be on Cordelia's side, just like in The Merchant of Venice. Of course we would know which casket to choose. No, we wouldn't. And I think it's right. I think it's very, very important in working with Shakespeare is to suppress knowledge. One of the other things that we need to remember is that all of these plays were premieres, that people weren't coming to the play having read the play. They didn't have knowledge, as our students do, of where the play is going to end. You have to be on the edge of your seat saying, what's going to happen, what's going to happen, what's going to happen. That's what I think.
You can listen to the full interview with Shakespeare scholar Carol Rutter with a subscription to Digital Theatre Plus.